and welcome to Alice in Gothic Land, a place where we talk about all things Gothic and I help you with your critical thinking and any working on your fears as well. So whatever those fears look like, I will help you because the Gothic and the Gothic texts allows you to do that. So very welcome again, and I hope last week you found those videos useful. I hope that you thought that you've got enough tools now to start analyzing texts, to at least identify periods of time, to know more or less about definitions. And you've probably figured out that the complexity of defining the Gothic, because it's not an easy thing. And I suppose that now your head, now you've got a little bit clear where the periods are and why and what we have inherited. So, okay, right. So, as I was saying, thank you for being here, and I hope you have actually enjoyed what you watched last week. And today, I'm going to start another series of 5 live videos. And this week is all about trying now to see these elements that make up the Gothic. Okay, we started with the periods, with the definitions, and now we're just going to be looking at what makes the Gothic be what it is. So we saw how we went from Gothic literature to the Gothic mode. We saw different threads. We saw the different genres. We saw that actually that the Gothic touches everything. Okay, it is even in non-fiction, because there's always eerie moments in our lives. There's always moments even in films or in books where the Gothic actually lurks in and it kind of sneaks in normal non-fiction texts. So what I want to do this week, and today we'll start with one of the parts. So this week I want to go in depth regarding 4 main characteristics of the Gothic to start with. Let's see how far we're going to be extending that. And we're going to be talking about some of the elements that make up the Gothic at a literary level as well, makes the Gothic to be what it is. Because then when you are in front of one of these texts, you can identify it and you can say, yes, this text is Gothic, or this text has got Gothic elements, or this film, or this TV series. It's not just only limited to the literary space. And also because I want to do all these, because by going and analyzing all these, we are going to be going in depth into our own fears, and fears can look very different for different people. And fears is something that is not really talked about, apart from when you go to therapy or when you're talking to a friend. But the reality is that the Gothic allows you to go into that space that is uncomfortable, to analyze feelings, terrors, horror. And now we're going to start introducing all these elements that we didn't really introduce before. Right, okay, I've got my computer's a little bit slow, so don't panic, I'm just checking something, but I have to keep going, otherwise we can't keep doing this video. So sorry about that, it's just I get messages here. Right, so as I was saying, this week, well, today, well, the 4 characteristics I'm going to be talking about this week are the sublime, the weight of tradition, the uncanny, and otherness. All these have been aspects that have been consistent throughout the Gothic, throughout all the time from the beginning. And I will explain the importance of knowing them when we're reading text, so you can then identify and understand better what's going on. So this is not only when you're reading the stories, but also if you are a writer and you're writing Gothic stories, then this is going to be helpful. Then I'm going to teach you why each term is important and how can you benefit from knowing these. So today we're going to be talking about the sublime, right? And let's start always like with definitions, origins, and then I will explain to you the importance of the sublime. So the first thing I want to tell you is that normally we connect the sublime with Edmund Burke, but who was a philosopher. And he wrote a text called A Philosophical Inquiry into the Origin of Our Ideas of the Sublime and Beautiful. And he did this in 1757. But the reality is that the term sublime already existed in Greek times. So it already appeared on the 1st century AD under the literary work called On the Sublime, precisely. This text was written anonymously, where they still haven't found exactly who was the writer. There are some names that have been put on the table, but the reality is that is a text that doesn't really have a writer. They don't know who the writer is. So in this text, the writer makes references to the aesthetics and the importance of good and bad writing. So we're talking here about what the writing, how the use of certain words in a certain way can trigger certain thoughts and certain feelings on the reader. So we already have this dichotomy, good versus bad writing. And this initial idea of the sublime was that certain writing could elevate itself above the ordinary. Right? This is some information, some of this information that I'm telling you now, the source of this is actually Wikipedia, and it's actually quite good and it's quite accurate. Then you can do further research and confirm this. But this is the main idea, okay? Remember that with Wikipedia we can always do extra research and then we can actually confirm, we can add information, but it's an initial point that is very important and it's good. So this initial idea of the sublime was that certain, it said that certain writings could elevate itself above the ordinary. So it's like a distinctive, to make the writing a little bit more distinctive from other types of writing. So based on this text, that as I said, we don't really know who the writer is, Cassius Longinus said that who was the most distinguished scholar of his day, he talked about five important elements of the sublime. And I'm telling you all this because it is very, very relevant to what came after. Things don't, I always say this, and I've been saying that from the beginning, things don't just pop up from nowhere. There's already something before. It's just that things evolve and things keep moving on as time goes on and as new influences and new ways of approaching the same idea appear. But this is very interesting because he says that the 5 important elements of the sublime are great thoughts. Now think about the Victorian times, think about everything that came after when we were talking about the Gothic last week, all the different periods, and you will see that these are like general ideas. So great thoughts, strong emotions, certain figure of thought and speech, novel diction, and dignified word arrangement. Now I think this is very interesting, considering that the Gothic wasn't considered, at some periods, wasn't considered good quality writing, and yet it uses the sublime as one of the elements, one of the main elements of the Gothic. Is really, really important. So bear with me because it's complicated, and you're going to see that this is a characteristic that goes throughout before 1757 when Edmund Burke wrote about it. It goes already from as you see, many centuries ago before. So what do we have here? We have that the writer's intention is that the reader experiences ecstasy when reading. Right? Think about Gothic texts. Again, you just think about the Gothic texts. If you remember anything scary, anything extreme, anything that is borderline supernatural, right? And you have actually this, that you get this experience of ecstasy. What brings you that, apart from the setting and apart from the place where the action takes place, is actually the way we have been told this. We have been described these places. It's not the same saying the main character went through the woods, than actually making this process of going through the woods in such a way, describing it in such a way that you actually fear, you listen almost all the crunchiness of the leaves, and that you can even sense the characters' fears as well. So all that is what actually makes a text different from a normal description to something a little bit more elaborated. So some of the effects he talked about, Cassius Longinus, was about the loss of rationality and alienation, leading to identification with the creative process of the artist, and a deep emotion mixed in pleasure and exaltation. Okay, now things are starting to make sense. Everything that I explained to you last week starts to make sense. So as we can see, this will set up the basis that will come later with Edmund Burke. So he defined the sublime as an artistic effect productive of the strongest emotion the mind is capable of feeling. Okay, so now, because we are adapting this original idea to the time that Edmund Burke wrote about this, we get like an additional definition on this. So basically for him, the sublime is everything that produces this admiration, this awe in us, yeah, this surprise. And now is where we're going to get the twist, because this idea moved to other artistic representation. It started with philosophy, but then it went into what you feel when you look at a statue, or to a painting, or to a wild landscape. And it also is all what we feel, yeah? It is all we feel to be bigger or more powerful than ourselves. It's this sensation. So an example of this is the photograph that I have behind me, which I told you about the other day that I couldn't remember the name because it's quite long. So this painting is called The Wonder Over the Sea Fog. It was painted in 1817 by Caspar David Friedrich. It's one of my favorite painters. I know I should know the name because it's one of my favorites, right? But I'm really bad with names. So this is one of the examples that normally is used to talk about the Gothic and to talk about the sublime and the romantic sublime as well. But Burke also talked about the fact that because we have this sensation, this feeling of awe and overwhelmed, even if you want, then at the same time what our imagination is doing is experiencing this thrill. But at the same time, because everything is big and we cannot control it, we feel fear. And we feel fear through things that are dark, uncertain, confused. And this is actually the path that Immanuel Kant will take, and will give the sublime like a new characteristic by saying that the sublime arises from an object that incites terror, and that an object can be terrifying and thus sublime without the beholder actually being afraid of it. So here he mentions imagination, the rational mind, and morality as new characteristics of the sublime. So as you can see, the sublime is going to evolve as well, like everything else. Other poets that talked and collected this idea of the sublime were William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, that were Victorian poets and writers, right? So why is this important? And to actually analyze this, I'm going to tell you about an article written by Emily Dabler, and the article is called The Sublime's Effects in Gothic Fiction, and it's published in The Artifice. This is online as well. So it's important that she mentions that the sublime is what we get by creating thrill and intrigue by the hand of ghosts, spacious castles, and fainting heroes. As you can see, again, we have these general characteristics that even though the Gothic keeps evolving, there are certain elements that never go away. We might be replacing the castles by an old manor or by a new flat in New York that is haunted, but we still get this idea of the thrill and the intrigue. We also have fainting heroes. I mean, if you think about for those who are supernatural lovers like I am, all these things still make sense. And I mean, Supernatural finished in 2020. The 2019 was the last episode. Exactly, just during pandemic time, no, 2020. Exactly. They finished during the pandemic time. So 15 years of Supernatural and we can't have enough. So if you think about that series too, for those who are more familiarized with more modern settings or more modern work, and is in the cinematic area, in the series arena, then you can see that we still have all these elements very much alive. So the sublime, this sensation that we kind of are, we're scared, but at the same time we love being scared, is also a tool used to show, and this is what Dabler says, to show discomfort regarding new scientific discoveries. It creates the terror that describes all the dark sides of humankind, as well as supernatural awareness. And this is a word that I love, creating awareness. Without having awareness, then we don't really know how to continue working on our fears. So she says that this concept deals with how authors capture the characters' trauma and fear. So, as readers, we are going to be feeling similar things to the characters because we're going to empathize. And this is what happens when there's fear in the way and there's trauma, that extreme emotions bring readers to connect with the text and with the whatever is happening with the characters. So this is the aspect that I'm more interested in also myself, because this is how I can actually help you in your own journey, overcoming your own fears, expressing them, going deep down in what really hurts, in painful moments and situations, extreme situations, is how you actually overcome the fears. And actually, this is therapy for those who actually have fear of death. It's called thanatophobia. There is a there are cognitive exercises that involve precisely to talk and to confront, be face to face with these fears, fears of death in this case. But also, one of the things that they do is putting the person who's got the phobia in front, or exposing the person to situations that they actually fear. So, like going to a cemetery or talking about death. So, visiting those uncomfortable places, they're not going to make death disappear, obviously not. But we can actually live happier and at least accept and find solutions to accept these moments. So, for example, this is what we can do with the Gothic. By reading Gothic literature and by going to these texts, we're going to be seeing that there might be options that we like supernatural options that we can think of, or that we have alternatives there, or other tools, or we accept these situations and then we are happier and we're not having to be thinking about death all the time. It's just part of life. So in this acceptance, we move on, we're happier, then we can keep working. You can also be writing about this to help other people. Like if you've gone through certain moments in your life, you can use these to help other people overcome their own fears in moments that nobody actually knows how you feel, and you don't even find literature that talks about it, and they can actually help you. So it is very important, and it's not just for entertainment purposes, as you can see, it's also for therapeutical purposes. So the Sublime allows us to see how the fears present in Gothic literature factor into real life concerns. This is what Dabler says. She also says that terror is what brings light to the marginalized, that once they have a voice, they show the reader how to come out of their troubles. And this is good because by showing the reader how they overcome their traumas, then again, we get tools and we empathize. Super important to empathize with your texts. If you empathize, you create new connections in your brain, and this is all very, very healthy. And then is when you can find solutions to overcome your problems. So the sublime, she says, also is questions the dichotomies such as pleasure and pain, and the instinctive attraction that humans feel towards it. And it's true, we might be in front of a really sad, scary situation, and even though we feel horrified sometimes, we still go there, and we actually want to know more. We have this morbid necessity of knowing more. So this is because this is innate in us. Why we're going to hide it? Why we're going to feel ashamed of it? Let's go and visit it and see what can actually bring us. How can we be happier beings by diving into these painful moments to actually come out of the pain? Okay, we go to the Gothic precisely to get out of the Gothic, which is strange, but I think it's a beautiful way of thinking about it. So obviously here has appeared, the terms have appeared, terror, horror, and I'm not going to go deep into those because that will take another whole session. But what I'm going to do is actually recommend you this book that tells you very well about those. It tells you, yes, I think I've talked about this book the other day, Horror, A Literary History, and it's by the British Librarian. It's been edited by Xavier Aldana Reyes, another of his books that I really love. So here, for those who love horror, you have a very good introduction. You have like the whole process, the whole again, from the beginning to our times now. You've got all the periods, and you've got, it's very easy to read. It has a lot of information, and it also has suggestions for further readings, which I love. It has images. I mean, it's wonderful, and it doesn't matter how many times you read it, you're going to find a lot of information and you're going to be wanting to revisit it. So it's actually a very good tool to have handy. Also because it goes in depth between differentiating the terms and the complexities, and where the terms sometimes connect and they step into each other's territory. So that's very good. Okay, friends, so this is for me today. If there are questions, remember that you can post them. I will be also sending you some links. Remember that I also, if you like the Gothic and this is the first video you see from the series and you're thinking, what is the Sublime? What is this woman talking about? Remember that I also have my blog, gothicalice.com is my website, and there you have my blog. And you can read a lot of articles regarding the Gothic, my own experiences with it, but also interviews. You can read about experiences, you can read a lot of things. And also you're gonna be, well, you can see a little bit what I do and how I can actually help you. If you're interested in having a chat, a conversation with me, then you can book a free session with me, and then we can talk about how I can actually help you through the Gothic to overcome your fears. Normally I talk about communication fears because I come from a linguistic background as well, but nowadays I'm currently moving also to the literary arena. So if you are a writer and you're not quite sure how to find your ideas for a ghost story, or you've got a profile that nobody can actually really help you with because it falls in the lands of the Gothic, then we can talk and I can help you to, I can coach you and I can help you to get your ideas out and to find your strengths and weaknesses, and we can work together if that's something that you need. Also because writing, as you know, is therapeutical. So by writing down your fears, you're going to overcome them better. And there are many ways of working on those, okay, and working on them. So tomorrow more, don't miss it. I hope you have enjoyed it. I will put all the links down below in the video, and thank you very much. Since I don't see any questions, although my page is doing strange things at the moment, I hope that is clear and that we can talk again. Yeah, no, there are no comments, and we can talk again tomorrow. Thank you very much and see you next time.